section.
Okay, so in chapter 30 here with Dewey Dell, what's up is she is in the wagon with her family, and they're carrying her mom to Jefferson where they're going to bury her. And Dewey Dell like she anticipates that she is going to see a sign for the town of New Hope. And there's definite some connotations there with the words New Hope. All right. So she anticipates seeing the sign, but then she kind of starts thinking. And I'm not going to read the whole chapter for Dewey Dell, but the part that I think is important is what I highlighted right here in yellow. I heard that my mother is dead. I wish I had time to let her die. I wish I had time to wish I had. It is because in the wild and outraged earth, too soon, too soon, too soon. It's not that I wouldn't and will not. It's that it is too soon, too soon, too soon. Okay? So basically, Dewey Dell is like, I really wish that I had time to mourn the death of my mother, but I don't because I have bigger problems. I have other things that I'm worried about. She's worried about her situation. Okay? So, it's almost as if she can't concentrate on the thing that is important, which is losing her mother. She's concentrating on, the problem that she is trying to deal with, so she can't think of anything else. So she's very confused, all right? So she continues, and she talks about Darrell, she talks about Vardaman, she talks about how she dreams she killed Darrell. We see the buzzard coming back, okay? And during her chapter, she anticipates seeing the New Hope sign, then she sees the New Hope sign, and then the New Hope sign is behind them. Okay, so in the Toll chapter, look, I've drawn a picture for you.
Oh, I need that.
So my picture is representative of the bridge that's crossing the river. All right, so we see the two pieces of the bridge holding on each side where the land is, and then the water is going over the bridge here instead of under it. And there's like logs that are crossing the bridge as well. Okay? So Toll is describing it. And he is, like, this is not going to end well. All right? So the Bundrans pass his house, and so he hops on his mule, or he takes his mule, and he goes down there to see what's going on at the river with them. He mentions at the top of page 124 that the logs are drifting over the top of the bridge. Okay, so this is potentially a bad idea to cross this bridge because they could get hit by a log. All right, think about that. And, the water is just churning. On page 125, Toll talks a little bit more about Darrell and how Darrell has these strange eyes. And it's not so much something that Darrell has said, and it's not so much something that Darrell has done. It's just the way that Darrell looks at you that makes him so creepy, because he looks at you like he knows that you've done something wrong. All right? And then again, on page 126, he mentions the log again. All right? We sit there above the water. Another log bobs up over the jam and goes on. We watch it check up and swing slow for a minute where the ford used to be, like a place where you could cross, and then it goes on. And so he mentions that the river might go down some tonight. They might want to wait another day, which would be another day that Addie is out of the ground, not buried. All right? And then he describes Jewel's face going green and red, and he's mentioned this prior. And Jewel he says some ugly things to us, like, why are you here? You're not part of this. Why are you here just looking at us, checking things out? And they bring up the idea of borrowing Toll's mule so that they could use Toll's mule to help them cross the river. And Toll's like, nope, my mule's not getting in that water. So our questions for chapter 30 are, what things does Dewey Dell wish for? She wishes she had time to mourn her mother. All right, she wishes she had more time to mourn her mother. And then she mentions two dreams. And she mentions, a dream where she is disconnected from herself. And she mentions a dream where she kills Darrell. And they both kind of represent the situation that she's in. She's mad because Darrell knows her issues, but she also feels very disconnected from herself because of her worries.
What's the other thing? So what? She dreams she kills Darrell.
And she has this dream where when Vardaman and she used to sleep together where she was very disconnected from herself. Mm-hmm.
So the thoughts and feelings are that she feels disconnected from herself?
Mm-hmm.
And that she's mad at Darl.
All right, in chapter 31, Tull goes down the river to the damaged bridge to help the Bundrins. And what kind of reception do they give him? How do they treat him?
Hostile.
Yeah, they're kind of cold to him, hostile. And what does he refuse to do, which infuriates Jewel? Yeah, let them use his mule. And what does Ans do in this section? Nothing at all. He just kind of stands there and looks at the water. All the more reason to pay better. Okay, so we're actually going to read this Darl chapter. All right. Do I have someone that would be willing to read some? Yeah, go ahead.
He sits before glaring at Vernon, his lean face thus up to and beyond the pale rigidity of his eyes. This summer, when he was 15, he took a spell of sleeping. One morning, when I went to feed the mules, that word.
Mules.
Mules. The cows were still in the tie-up, and then I heard Pa go back to the house and call him. When we came on back to the house for breakfast, he passed us, carrying the milk bucket, stumbling along like he was drunk. And he was milking when we put the mules in and went on to the field without him. We had been there an hour, and still he never showed up. When Dewey Dale came with our lunch, Pa sent her back to find Jewel. They found him in the tie-up, sitting on the stool, asleep. After that, every morning Pa would go in and wake him. He would go to sleep at the supper table, and as soon as supper was finished, he would go to bed. And when I came into bed, he would be lying there like a dead man. Yet still Pa would have to wake him in the morning. He would get up, but he wouldn't hardly have half sinned. He would stand for Pa's jawing and complaining without a word, and take the milk bucket and go to the barn. And once I found him asleep at the cow, the bucket in place and half full, and his hands up to the wrist in milk, and his head against the cow's flank. After that, Dewey Dale had to do the milking. He still got up when Pa waked him, but about when we told him to do them that day's way. It was like he was trying hard to do them, that he was as puzzled as anyone else. Are you sick? Ma said. Don't you feel all right? Yes, Jewel said. I feel all right. He's just lazy, trying me, Pa said, and Jewel standing there asleep on his feet, like as not. Ain't you? He said, waking Jewel up again to answer. No, Jewel said. You take off and stay in the house today, Ma said. With that whole bottom piece to be busted out, Pa said. If you ain't sick, what's the matter with you? Nothing, Jewel said. I'm all right. All right, Pa said. You're asleep on your feet this minute. No, Jewel said. I'm all right. I want him to stay at home today, Ma said.
All right, notice here that when Ans is talking about Jewel being lazy, that's irony because Ans is the lazy one. All right, Bailey, do you want to keep reading or do you want somebody else? Go. Do you want to read?
I'll need him, Pa said. It's tight enough with all of us to do it. You'll just have to do the best you can with Cash and Darl, Ma said. I want him to stay in today. But he wouldn't do it. I'm all right, he said, going on. But he wasn't all right. Anybody could see it. He was losing flesh, and I have seen him go to sleep chopping, watch the hoe going slower and slower up and down with less and less of an arc, until it stopped and he leaning on it motionless in the hot shimmer of the sun. Ma wanted to get the doctor, but Pa didn't want to spend the money without it was needful, and Jewel did seem all right, except for his thinness and his way of dropping off to sleep at any moment. He ate hearty enough, except for his way of going to sleep in his plate with a piece of bread halfway to his mouth and his jaws still chewing, but he swore he was all right. It was Ma that got Dewey Dale to do his milking, paid her somehow, and the other jobs around the house that Jewel had been doing before supper, she found some way for Dewey Dale and Bartiman to do them. And doing them herself when Pa wasn't there. She would fix him special things to eat and hide them for him. And that may have been when I first found it out that Addie Bundren should be hiding anything she did, who had tried to teach us that deceit was such that, in a world where it was, nothing else could be very bad or very important, not even poverty. and at times when I went in to go to bed, she'd be sitting in the dark by Joel where he was asleep. And I knew that she was hating herself for that deceit and hating Joel because she had to love him so that she had to act the deceit. One night she was taken sick, and when I went to the barn to put the team in and drive to Toll's, I couldn't find the lantern. I remembered noticing it on the nail the night before, but it wasn't there now at midnight. So I hitched in the dark and went on it and came back with Mrs. Toll just after daylight. And there the lantern was, hanging on the nail where I remembered it and couldn't find it before. And then one morning when Dewey Dell was milking just before sunup, Joel came into the barn from the back through the hole in the back wall with the lantern in his hand. I told Cash, and Cash and I looked at one another. Running, Cash said.
All right, what does that mean? Rutting. Anybody hunt? What is rut?
When they're mating.
Yeah. So they're saying that he's doing what?
He's seeing a girl.
Like he's seeing a girl. Yeah. So what's Jewel doing?
He's being mean.
Like he's acting really tired. He's falling asleep all the time. They're worried he's sick. He's thin. And then they notice he's doing what?
He's sneaking around.
He's sneaking around. So they think he's seeing a girl. All right. Do you want to keep going, or do you want somebody else to? Okay.
Yes, I said, but why the lantern? And every night, too. No wonder he's losing flesh. Are you going to say anything to him? Won't do any good, Cash said. What he's doing now won't do any good either. I know, but he'll have to learn that himself. Give him time to realize that it'll save that there'll be just as much more tomorrow, and he'll be all right. I wouldn't tell anybody, I reckon. No, I said. I told Dewey Dell not to. Not Ma, anyway. No, not Ma. After that, I thought it was right comical, he acting so bewildered and willing and dead for sleep and gone as a beanpole, and thinking he was so smart with it. And I wondered who the girl was. I thought of all I knew that it might be, and I couldn't say for sure. "'Tain't any girl," Cash said. "It's a married woman somewhere. Ain't any young girl got that much daring and staying power. That's what I don't like about it."
Okay, so they think that it's a woman, not a young girl, because of the staying power, how long this is lasting. Does anyone else want to read? Okay.
Why, I said, she'll be safer for him than a girl would, no judgment. He looked at me, his eyes fumbling, the words fumbling in what he was trying to say. It ain't always safe for things in this world, that a fella. You mean the safe things are not always the best things? Best, he said, fumbling again. It ain't the best things, the things that are good for him. A young boy, a fella kind of hates to see, wallowing in someone else's mire. That's what he was trying to say. When something's new and hard and bright, there ought to be something a little better for it than just being safe. Since the safe things are just the things that folks have been doing so long, they have worn the edges off, and there's nothing to the doing of them that leaves a man to say, that was not done before and cannot be done again. So we didn't tell, not even when after a while he'd appear suddenly in the field beside us and go to work, without having had time to get home and make out he had been in bed all night. He would tell Ma that he hadn't been hungry at breakfast, or that he had eaten a piece of bread while he was hitching up the team. But Cash and I knew that he hadn't been home at all on those nights, and he'd come up out of the woods when we got to the field, but we didn't tell. Summer was almost over then. We knew that when the nights began to get cool, she would be done if he wasn't. When fall came and the nights began to get longer, the only difference was that he would always be in bed for Pa to wake him, getting him up at the last and the first state of semi-idiocy, like when it first started, worse than when we had stayed out all night. She's sure a stayer, I told Cash. I used to admire her, but now I downright disrespect her.
Now I downright respect her now.
Oh,
So he used to admire her, but now he downright respects her because she sure is committed to whatever Jules got going on. Okay, go ahead.
It ain't a woman, he said. You know, I said, but he was watching me. What is it then? That's what I aim to find out, he said. You can trail him through the woods all night if you want to, I said. I'm not. I ain't trailing him, he said. What do you call it then? I ain't trailing him, he said. I don't mean it that way. And so a few nights later, I heard Joel get up and climb out the window, and then I heard Cash get up and follow him. The next morning when I went to the barn, Cash was already there, the mules fed, and he was helping Dewey Dell milk. And when I saw him, I knew that he knew what it was. Now and then I would catch him watching Joel with a queer look, like having found out where Joel went and what he was doing had given him something to really think about at last. But it was not a worried look. It was the kind of look I would see on him when I would find him doing some of Joel's work around the house, work that Pa still thought Jewel was doing and that Ma thought he was doing. So I said nothing to him, believing that when he got done digesting it in his mind, he would tell me, but he never did.
All right. So Cash knows what Jewel's up to. All right, but he hadn't told anybody. He's not telling anybody. So, he's just kind of picking up his chores and helping out around the house, and keeping it on the down low. All right. Does someone else want to read? Anybody besides the people that have already read? I will. One morning, it was November then, 5 months since it started. Jewel was not in bed, and he didn't join us in the field. That was the first time Ma learned anything about what had been going on. She sent Vardaman down to find where Jewel was, and after a while, she came down too. It was as though, so long as the deceit ran along quiet and monotonous, all of us let ourselves be deceived, abetting it unawares, or maybe through cowardice, since all people are cowards and naturally prefer any kind of treachery because it has a bland outside. But now it was like we had all, and by a kind of telepathic agreement of admitted fear, flung the whole thing back like covers on the bed, and we all sitting bolt upright in our nakedness, staring at one another and saying, now is the truth. He hasn't come home. Something has happened to him. We let something happen to him. So now they're worried. He's not come home, and they're worried that maybe they should have said something about what was really going on, his siblings. Then we saw him. He come up along the ditch and then turned straight across the field, riding the horse. Its mane and tail were going, as though in motion they were carrying out the splotchy pattern of its coat. He looked like he was riding on a big pinwheel, bare-backed with a rope bridle and no hat on his head. It was a descendant of one of those Texas ponies Flim Snopes brought here 25 years ago and auctioned off for $2 a head, and nobody but old Long Quick ever caught his and still owns some of the blood because he could never give it away, because people did not want these horses. All right? They don't want them at all. He galloped up and stopped, his heels on the horse's ribs and it dancing and swirling like the shape of its mane and tail, and the splotches of its coat had nothing whatever to do with the flesh and bone horse inside them. And he sat there looking at us. Where did you get that horse? Pa said. Bought it, Jewel said, from Mr. Quick. Bought it, Pa said. With what? Did you buy that thing on my word? It was my money, Jewel said. I earned it. You won't need to worry about it. Jewel, Ma said. Jewel. It's all right, Cash said. He earned the money. He cleaned up that 40 acres of new ground Quick laid out last spring. He did it single-handed, working at night by lantern. I saw him. So I don't reckon that horse cost anybody anything except Jewel. I don't reckon we need worry. Jewel, Ma said. Jewel. Then she said, you come right to the house and go to bed. Not yet, Jewel said. I ain't got time. I got to get me a saddle and bridle. Mr. Quick says he. Jewel, Ma said, looking at him. I'll give. Then she began to cry. She cried hard, not hiding her face, standing there in her faded wrapper, looking at him and him on the horse looking down at her, his face growing cold and a little sick looking, until he looked away quick and Cash came and touched her. You go on to the house, Cash said. This here ground is too wet for you. You go on now. She put her hands to her face then, and after a while she went on, stumbling a little on the plow marks. But pretty soon she straightened up and went on. She didn't look back. When she reached the ditch, she stopped and called Vardaman. He was looking at the horse, kind of dancing up and down by it. Let me ride, Jewel, he said. Let me ride, Jewel. Jewel looked at him. Then he looked away again, holding the horse rein back. Pa watched him, mumbling his lip. So you bought a horse, he said. You went behind my back and bought a horse. You never consulted me. You know how tight it is for us to make by, yet you bought a horse for me to feed. Taken the work from your flesh and blood and bought a horse with it. Jewel looked at Pa, his eyes paler than ever. He won't never eat a mouthful of yours, he said. Not a mouthful. I'll kill him first. Don't you never think it. Don't you never. Let me ride, Jewel, Vardaman said. Let me ride, Jewel. He sounded like a cricket in the grass, a little one. Let me ride, Jewel. That night I found Ma sitting beside the bed where he was sleeping in the dark. She cried hard, maybe because she had to cry so quiet, maybe because she felt the same way about tears she did about deceit, hating herself for doing it, hating him because she had to. And then I knew that I knew. I knew that as plain on that day as I knew about Dewey Dell on that day. So what does Darrell realize when he sees his mother crying at Jewel's bedside? That Jewel is not Anne's child. Like, he realizes the reason that she's so upset about this is because Jewel deceived them to get the horse by working at night, okay? And she deceived her husband and had Jewel. So her product of deceit has now, he's being deceitful, okay? And so that's why she is so upset. And we have this other reference to his pale eyes, again hinting that he has a different father, all right?
Is she sad because, he followed in her footsteps kind of thing?
Yeah. Also, right here when he says, not a mouthful, that he is not going to let his horse eat anything that Anne's provides. If you go back to chapter 3, where this is the section where Jewel has been beating the horse, and the horse kicks at him and all of this. He, clinging to the hay rack, he lowers his head and peers out across the stall tops and through the doorway. The path is empty. From here, he cannot even hear Cash sawing. He reaches up and drags down hay in hurried armfuls and crams it into the rack. He is feeding the horse Anne's hay here. That's why he looks to make sure nobody's coming, because he said, this horse isn't going to eat anything you provide, but he is taking the hay and feeding it to his horse. All right?
Man, I hope that the chapter was going to be something like, Joel knows that that's not the end of his dad. He was looking for his dad or something. Man, I was getting all excited. This is about a horse. This is not what I thought it was going to be.
And you're sad because it's about a horse?
Yeah, I thought it was going to be some lifetime chapter.
All right. So this chapter is about the river crossing. Okay? So they finally got Anne's to talk about what was going to do, and they decide that they are going to have Anne's and Dewey Dell and Tull cross over on foot on what's left of the bridge, and then they're going to have this rope, and Jewel and his horse are going to carry the rope across, and he's going to try to guide the wagon across this flooded river. Okay? So, rationally, you think about this, and you should think that's a really bad idea, right? Yeah. So, here we go. You ought to let them take in your mule, he says, and the bridge shaking and swaying under us, going down into the moiling water like it went clean through to the other side of the earth, and the other end coming up out of the water like it wasn't the same bridge at all, and that them that would walk up out of the water on that side must have come from the bottom of the earth. But it was still whole. You could tell that by the way when this end swagged, it didn't look like the other end swagged at all, just like the other trees in the bank yonder were swinging back and forth slow like on a big clock. Okay? And them logs scraping and bumping at the skunk part and tilting end up and shooting clean out in the water and tumbling on toward the ford, and the wading slick, whirling and foamy. So it's like we have these logs coming and we have like a whirlpool. All right? Do y'all see that visual? All right, so they decide that they're going to do this. They're going to cross. It was like when we was across up out of the water again and the hard earth under us that I was surprised. So he was surprised that they made it. It was like we hadn't expected the bridge to end on the other bank on something tame like the hard earth again that we had tromped on before this time and knowed well. Like it couldn't be me here because I'd have better sense to do done what I've just done. Like, he's got this huge sense of relief that they have made it. Like he didn't think, that he would do it. And he was like, I'm just glad that it's over. And Vardaman has also done that too. All right. Moving on, he has held Vardaman's hand. All right. Then we was over and we stood there looking at Cash turning the wagon around. We watched them drive back down the road to where the trail turned off into the bottom. After a while, the wagon was out of sight. We better get on down to the ford and get ready to help, I said. So they're going down to meet them at a different part. I give her my word, Anne says, and he's talking about burying Addie and Jefferson. It is sacred on me. I know you begrudge it, but she will bless you in heaven. Well, they've got to finish circumventing the land before they can dare the water, I said. Come on. It's the turning back, he said. It ain't no luck in turning back. He was standing there, humped, mournful, looking at the empty road beyond the swagging and swaying bridge, and that gal, too, with the lunch basket on one arm and that package under the other, just going to town, bent on it. They would risk, and I want you to pay attention to this, the fire, and the earth and the water, but we're missing one element, which is the air. So they're going to risk all of these things just to eat a stack of bananas. All right, so he really believes that what they're doing, taking her to town, is just ridiculously foolish, you know, and this is how he's illustrating it. And Anne continues, I gave my promise. She's counting on it. All right, so of the fire and the earth and the water and the air, which one are they risking right now? They're about to risk the water. All right. How are they having any kind of like connection to the air?
Does this go back to the sulfuric acid you're talking about? Does this go back to the sulfuric acid?
It could. We have those references to the air smells of sulfur. All right. What other air references do we have?
The dust bowl.
Huh?
The dust bowl.
Okay. That was during this time period. All right. We've had references to the wind. The buzzards are in the air. Addie is kind of because she smells. And she's a soul, you know. All right. So, and the earth is the land that they're having to travel, you know. So the only thing we haven't seen is the fire, right? I know. All right, so let's talk about the Odyssey real quick. In the Odyssey, we have Scylla and Charybdis, and it's kind of become a metaphor for a rock, between a rock and a hard place. Like you have to travel between them, and Scylla is a rock shoal. Like people rationalize Scylla as being a rock shoal, but you know, in mythology, it's a six-headed sea monster, and then Charybdis is a whirlpool. And you know, an Odyssey is a journey, and we had that reference to the title, As I Lay Dying. The woman with the dog's eyes would not close my eyes for me as I descended into Hades. That's the origin of the title. And we're on a journey to bury Addie, who laid in bed for 10 days before she went on her Odyssey to be buried. And Odysseus was imprisoned for 10 years before he went on his Odyssey. So there's definitely parallels, all right? So let's check this out. All right, in chapter 34, they are going to cross this river. Before us, the thick, dark current runs. It talks up to us in a murmur, becomes ceaseless and myriad. The yellow, again yellow, surface dimpled monstrously.
Wait, last chapter you said something about them like someone has a leaf about them crossing.
He crossed the bridge. Hole.
The bridge.
Yep.
Okay.
Monstrously into fading swirls, traveling along the surface for an instant, silent, impermanent, and profoundly significant, as though just beneath the surface something huge and alive waked for a moment of lazy alertness out of and into light slumber again. So can you see how we have kind of that reference to there's something in the water that could awaken like a monster? It clucks and murmurs along the spokes and about the mule's knees, yellows, scummed with flotsam, and with thick, soiled gouts of foam, as though it had sweat, lathering a driven horse. Through the undergrowth it goes with a plaintive sound, a musing sound. In it the unwinded cane and saplings lean as before a little gale, swaying without reflections, as though suspended on invisible wires from the branches overhead. Above the ceaseless surface they stand, trees, cane, vines, rootless, severed from the earth, spectral above a scene of immense yet circumscribed desolation, filled with the voice of waste and the mournful water. Cash and I sit in the wagon. Jewel sits the horse at the off rear wheel. The horse is trembling. Okay? So how's the horse feel about this?
Scared.
Horse is like, not a good idea, dude. Bad idea. Its eye rolling wild and baby blue in its long pink face. Its breathing stertorous like groaning. He sits erect, poised, looking quietly and steadily and quickly this way and that. His face calm, a little pale, alert. Cash's face is also gravely composed. He and I look at one another with long, probing looks that plunge unimpeded through one another's eyes and into the ultimate secret place where for an instant Cash and Darrell crouch flagrant and unabashed in all the old terror and the old foreboding, alert and secret and without shame. When we speak, our voices are quiet, detached. I reckon we're still in the road, all right. Toll taken and cut them 2 big white oaks. I heard tell at high water in the old days they used to line up the ford by them trees. Okay, so they're trying to look at landmarks so that they know that they're getting across on the higher area. I reckon he did that 2 years ago when he was logging down here. I reckon he never thought anybody would ever use this ford again. I reckon not. Yes, it must have been then. He cut a side of timber out in here then, paid off that mortgage with it, I hear tell. Yes, I reckon so. I reckon Vernon could have done that. That's a fact. Most folks that logs in this here country, they need a darn good farm to support the sawmill or maybe a store. But I reckon Vernon could. I reckon so. He's a sight. Vernon is. Yes, it must still be here. He never would have got that timber out of here. He hadn't cleaned out that old road. I reckon we're still on it. He looks about quietly at the position of the trees, leaning this way and that, looking back along the floorless road, shaped vaguely high in air by the position of the lopped and felled trees, as if the road, too, had been soaked free of earth and floated upward, to leave in its spectral tracing a monument to a still more profound desolation than this above which we now sit, talking quietly of old security and old trivial things. Jewel looks at him, then at me, then his face turns in that quiet, constant questing about the scene, the horse trembling quietly and steadily between his knees. And we'll stop there because the bell's about to ring.